Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Matt Hale, Solutions Consultant for the Public Sector at Zendesk. Matt, good to have you with us.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me.
And this idea of customer experience has really taken hold in government, partly because the government is not uniformly good at customer experience. It varies widely, and maybe it's a little bit behind the public sector. But to get good customer experience takes more than simply the intention to do so. You need some good, solid technological approaches. But what I wanted to start with is, what are the new and, in your opinion, most relevant metrics for benchmarking customer experience so you have a basis to begin measuring how your progress is going?
Sure. Yeah, so I think when you get under the hood, so to speak, the service that federal agencies are providing, it's got a lot of overlap actually with the private sector. And to that end, I wouldn't even necessarily say that there are new benchmarks and new metrics. When I see something new out there, nowadays at least, you probably agree, it really feels like something that's been just reskinned as something old. But I think if public sector can look at the industry metrics the private sector is used to using, then you're going to find a lot of the data that I think you're looking for and that really federal agencies should be striving for. The big ones for me is certainly CSAT, customer satisfaction. It's a good measure of short-term transactional approval of how a particular process went. The other big one, and Tom, you and I had talked about this a little bit the other day, that is kind of my secret sauce in the world of good customer experience, is a slightly lesser known industry metric called customer effort score. The idea behind this one is we're trying to track how difficult or how easy it was for somebody to complete a task, to do business with you, to get a form filled out, to resolve a particular issue. The idea is that you can't really prevent problems from happening, but the easier that you make it for your constituents, your customers in these scenarios, the better their experience is going to be. The less media firestorms you get involved with, the better your risk aversion is. All those goals that we know that the public sector is going for. Admittedly different than the private sector. We're not talking about increasing profit margins here, but that risk aversion, that saving taxpayer dollars, that giving them a better experience without burning ourselves out on the back end, I think is pretty universal.
That's pretty universal in business too, isn't it, though?
I
That
think
the
so.
axiom that people aren't as upset by a mistake or something occurring as they are if it can't be resolved properly and quickly and efficiently.
Exactly. And my personal favorite sort of, it sounds silly to say, but my favorite industry metric in the customer service world is what's first contact resolution or first call resolution. And that goes right back to that point that you can't stop a problem from happening, but the number one driver of customer satisfaction is, are we able to resolve that issue from happening, or that issue that came in, are we able to resolve that in a first call? So that can be a great place to start looking at this stuff. Now, the caveat being that, especially in the public sector world, I know a lot of the agencies that I work with, something like first call resolution is impossible because of security regulations, because of a process that has to come into place. If your process involves, let's say, a constituent reaching out, filling out a form, but then in order to resolve their ultimate issue, we've got to have some back and forth about what went wrong in that form or additional clarifying information. Maybe we need an approval or collaboration with another partnering agency. There's no way you're going to be able to do all that in one call. So what I really strive for when it comes to trying to identify which metrics, which benchmarks to be looking at, is to figure out what is really my goal in a particular scenario, and then pick and choose the metrics that actually apply to that. If it's not going to be first call resolution, maybe something like paying attention to our handling times, or back to that customer effort score. Can we identify particular bottlenecks in a process that might give us some of this actionable intelligence to be able to do something with moving forward?
So there's a big data component to this. And so the question then becomes, is this knowable information? And let me put it this way: can you architect your systems or deploy systems such that they are designed to give you that data on a regular basis so that you can start to understand what's going on with customer experience and understand call resolutions and effort and so forth, the different metrics you've outlined.
Sure, I think so. I think honestly, most modern day systems for communication, collaboration, ticketing systems, Zendesk, for example, for anyone not familiar with us, we're what's called an omni-channel help desk service platform, right? Our job is to create ticketing scenarios and workflows to handle this kind of communication with customers. Most systems like us that kind of exist in this market already give you the ability to collect this type of data that you need out of the box. It's really more about learning to use it, turning that intelligence into actionable intelligence. I think really the best place to start with it, first make sure that you're able to do things like basic time tracking across all of the different channels that you manage. If you're accepting phone calls or emails, or people are filling out a form on a website, and that's what's leading you down a path to resolving a particular issue or what have you, make sure that you're able to understand how long these basic processes are taking, so that you can actually do something about that. You compare that to an industry benchmark. How long does the industry say this process should take, or what are other similar agencies seeing in this particular area? Beyond that, potentially some basic surveying as well. I kind of go back and forth with my opinions on surveying, especially when it comes to public sector. Having somebody fill out a CSAT survey saying, how did you like this interaction with us is great. But I know that personally, admittedly in my own life, I usually don't fill out a survey unless I had either a really, really positive experience or a really, really negative experience. And then I'm just, oh yeah, you're gonna hear what I have to say. So a lot of the times it's kind of like, well, what kind of data are we really getting out of that? How are we really identifying this? But if you take your surveying and you pair that with understanding time tracking, understanding resolution times, this data that's just going to be constantly fed into your systems, your ticketing platforms already, that's when you can start to really build that bigger picture of identifying what your trends are, what your potential bottlenecks are, what your strengths are, and understanding that. That's when I think intelligence starts to become actionable.
And is it a wise practice to publish these statistics and the trends to the people actually on the front lines dealing with, in this case, constituents or other people dealing with the government? For years, factories have had this many days since an accident, or the daily widget output to motivate people. Is that a good practice? Is that what the best commercial people do?
Whew, that's an interesting one. I would say it depends on the scenario. Certainly, if your scores, so to speak, if the process that you're putting out, if you're working to try and improve this, if this is a goal for your particular agency, I think it certainly can't hurt. It can even help to show that you're making an effort, even if your scores are bad, so to speak. Scores, being the operative word there. Even if the data isn't great, just being able to show that, hey, this is something that we're serious about. This is something that we're working on. That can, in my mind, and I can certainly say that it has for customers that we've worked with in this space, start to give you that, or give your constituents that picture of, this isn't a stereotypical black hole of government. There's this transparency here. Our public sector leaders are working to try to make things better for us. People understand that, I think, and I think that does help.
And by the same token, the system can also help you pinpoint individuals from a managerial standpoint that might need help with a certain process or additional training if they are the outlier with respect to some of the metrics.
Oh, for sure. I think that stuff is pretty standard here. That's basic internal, QA in my mind. For example, a system like Zendesk, in our most basic reporting, we're able to do at least simple time tracking on, how long is it taking a particular agent to resolve this task? Who's got the biggest backlog? Who's able to be the top performer? I don't like to use this kind of data so much for detracting from a particular person on the team. But just as you're saying, and that can be helpful if we can identify who are our best people and who are people that may need a little bit of extra help. We've thereby identified who may be able to help those people, or how we might be able to help those people, or how even the technology might be able to relieve some of the issues that some of these people are happening. A lot of times, good technology, especially in the world today of automated intelligence, artificial intelligence, there's a lot that the software can do in terms of that heavy lift to make things easier on your actual staff so that they can do the things that humans do best.
Because you don't want to necessarily maximize throughput for the sake of throughput if that'll detract from the outcome as experienced by the client or the customer.
Exactly. I don't think, I think it's a misnomer that every call center operation is just trying to crank out as many requests as they can. Being able to get a response, that's a huge part of it. But that sort of white glove customer service that, especially in the private sector, they're always striving for, applying that same kind of concept to government, that can be huge. When I'm dealing with a particular, I'm not going to name any particular agency here, but when I'm dealing with an issue that requires me to get in touch with a particular agency, it's hard to not get away from that stereotype that this is going to be
Sure.
frustrating, this is going to take a while, are they going to pay attention to me? And having a really positive customer experience, that's getting back to one of those industry statistics that a lot of public sector might not even realize can apply to them. This idea of net promoter score, which is trying to track things like brand loyalty and how often people are going to turn around and promote your brand. Imagine constituents out there telling tales and promoting, how well agency A or agency B is doing to resolve their issues. That's how you know that you're really making an impact. And I think that from an altruistic standpoint, that's a lot of what our public sector customers are really going for in the end anyway, at least from that day-to-day agent perspective.
All right. And I want to get into that omni-channel idea a little bit deeper. But first, we're going to take a short break. My guest today is Matt Hale, solutions consultant for the public sector at Zendesk. I'm Tom Temin. This discussion is delivering a world-class call center experience in government, sponsored by Zendesk here on Federal News Network.